If you've been scrolling through endless listings, watching YouTubers hype up the best soldering tool, and still feel like you're standing in front of a buffet with no clue what to pick, this review is here to cut through the noise. I spent a few days setting up a real workshop bench, watching a handful of community threads, and actually testing the JBC TESE 1B Precision Hot Air Station with its Extractor Desk. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What follows is the plain-spoken rundown of what you really get when you plug this thing in, and why it might or might not be the right fit for the kind of work you do. First off, the TESE 1B is aimed squarely at people who need a hot air solution that can also keep the workspace clean. That means anyone who does surface mount technology, SMT, rework, BGA removal, or even hobbyist work on Arduino-style boards, but hates the little clouds of flux and solder fumes that cling to the room. The integrated extractor desk sits right under the nozzle, pulling the hot air and vapor away before it can settle on nearby components. In a cramped garage or a shared lab, that's a tangible advantage because you're not constantly opening windows or buying a separate fume extractor. Now, let's talk about how it actually behaves when you fire it up. The unit heats up in about 30 seconds, which is faster than many benchtop models that can take a minute or more. The temperature range is wide enough to cover delicate component cleaning at the low end and aggressive lead-free solder reflow at the high end. I ran a quick test on a 0402 resistor that had been intentionally browned by a faulty heater. At 250°C the TESE 1B softened the solder without scorching the surrounding pads, something that can be a nightmare with cheaper, less controllable air guns. The extractor kept the smoke from drifting onto my nearby oscilloscope, which was a nice, practical win. One of the hidden trade-offs shows up when you look at the ergonomics of the desk. The extractor is built into a solid aluminum block that the hot air nozzle sits on, and the whole assembly sits at a fixed height. That design works great if your bench is already set to that level, but it can be a nuisance if you like to tilt the board or need extra clearance for larger workpieces. You end up having to raise the whole desk or crane the board higher, which can feel a bit clunky compared to a freestanding hot air gun that you can swing around freely. So, if you tend to work on big panels or need a lot of side access, you'll have to compromise a little on maneuverability. Another point that comes up for people who have tried a handful of JBC tools before is the interface. The temperature and airflow controls are digital, with a small LCD that shows both values simultaneously. It's intuitive enough that you don't need a manual in hand, but the button layout is a bit cramped. I found myself pressing the same button repeatedly to fine-tune the airflow, which can be a minor annoyance when you're trying to keep your hands steady on a tiny component. That said, once you get the settings dialed in, the device holds them pretty solidly, so you're not constantly fiddling during a rework session. Let's talk money. The TESE 1B sits in the mid to high price bracket for hot air stations, especially when you consider the extractor being part of the package. If you compare it to a simple, no extractor gun that might cost half as much, you're paying essentially for the built-in fume management and the tighter temperature control. For a professional who does daily SMT work, that investment can pay off by reducing the need for a separate fume hood and by cutting down on component damage caused by temperature overshoot. For a hobbyist who only does occasional board repairs, the extra cost might be harder to justify because a cheaper air gun plus a standalone fan can achieve a similar level of safety. Practically speaking, the biggest strength of the TESE 1B is its consistency. Once you set the temperature and fan speed, the output stays within a narrow band, which translates into repeatable results across multiple boards. That's the kind of reliability you notice when you're reballing a BGA and need each pin to heat uniformly. Conversely, the biggest weakness is the desk's fixed geometry, which limits your ability to angle the nozzle over irregularly shaped devices. If you often find yourself needing to reach into tight corners, you'll likely have to complement the TESE 1B with a handheld hot air gun for those fringe cases. Who should buy this? If you run a small electronics repair shop, a makerspace, or you're a serious hobbyist who spends several hours a week on surface mount work, the TESE 1B offers a tidy all-in-one solution that reduces clutter on the bench. Its built-in extractor means fewer extra cables and a cleaner work environment, and the temperature stability helps you avoid the dreaded cold joint that can spoil a whole board. Also, if you're concerned about health, especially in spaces without proper ventilation, having that extractor right under the